Katherine Richardson clutched the deed to the once beloved family home in her trembling hands. The parchment crumpled from her husband's careless grip when he'd stumbled through the door at dawn to announce that their life together was over all, because he couldn't resist one more hand of cards at the Gilded Ace Saloon in Verde, Nevada. The year was 1875, and Verde was still a young town, sprouting up alongside the transcontinental railroad that had transformed the Nevada territory just a few years earlier. Catherine Kate, to those who knew her well, had arrived with her husband Robert Richardson 5 years ago, full of hope and dreams of building a prosperous life in the West. At 26, she had already weathered more storms than most women twice her age. "We have 3 days," Robert had mumbled before collapsing onto their bed, reeking of whiskey and shame. 3 days before Stanley Whitaker claims this house and everything in it. Now, as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across their modest but lovingly maintained home, Kate stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her husband's fitful sleep. The rage that had consumed her that morning had cooled into something harder, more resolute. 5 years of marriage, and this was where they had ended up, Robert gambling away not just their savings, but the very roof over their heads. Kate moved quietly through the house, her fingers trailing over the furniture she had polished religiously every Sunday after church. The pine table Robert had crafted when they first arrived, the small bookshelf filled with the few precious volumes she had brought from her father's home in Ohio, the rocking chair where she had dreamed of nursing the children that never came. A sharp knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Hastily wiping her eyes, Kate smoothed her apron and opened the door to find Mrs. Abigail Foster, the wife of Verde's only doctor, standing on her porch with a concerned expression. "I heard what happened, Kate," the older woman said softly. "The whole town's talking." Of course they were. In a place like Verde, news, especially the scandalous kind, traveled faster than a wildfire in July. "Would you like to come in for tea, Mrs. Foster?" Kate asked, her voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Mrs. Foster nodded and followed Kate into the small but tidy kitchen. As Kate busied herself with the kettle, Mrs. Foster settled at the table. "Stanley Whitaker is not known for his mercy," Mrs. Foster said, accepting the cup Kate offered. "Robert's gotten himself in with a bad crowd." "Robert has gotten himself in with his own weaknesses," Kate replied, the bitterness she'd been suppressing all day finally seeping into her voice. "He promised me after the last time, swore on his mother's grave he wouldn't gamble again." "Men make promises they can't keep," Mrs. Foster sighed. "Dr. Foster says half the men who come through his door with broken noses and cracked ribs got them trying to settle gambling debts." Kate sipped her tea, her mind racing. "I have some savings," she said quietly. "Not enough to buy back the house, but perhaps enough to start somewhere new." Mrs. Foster reached across the table to squeeze Kate's hand. "Before you make any decisions, you should know there's a stranger in town. Arrived yesterday on the afternoon train. A cowboy from the looks of him, though he carries himself differently than the usual drifters." "What has that to do with me?" Kate asked, puzzled. "He was at the Gilded Ace last night, witnessed the whole sorry affair according to my husband, asked about Robert afterward, who he was, where he lived." Mrs. Foster lowered her voice. "They say he watched the game carefully, Kate, and he wasn't drinking, not like the others." A flicker of something not quite hope, but perhaps curiosity sparked in Kate's chest. "Did this stranger have a name?" "Lucas Reeves, so I'm told. Tall fellow with eyes the color of a summer storm." Mrs. Foster stood, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "I should get back, Doctor. Foster will be wondering where I've disappeared to. But Kate," she added, pausing at the door, "if I were you, I'd keep an eye out for this Mr. Reeves. Something tells me he might be more than just a passing traveler." After Mrs. Foster left, Kate sat alone at the table, turning her teacup slowly in its saucer. Lucas Reeves. The name meant nothing to her, and yet it echoed in her mind like a distant melody. Why would a stranger take interest in her husband's misfortune? In Verde, as in most frontier towns, Men's business was their own unless money was owed or revenge was sought. The sound of Robert stirring in the bedroom interrupted her thoughts. She braced herself for the confrontation that was to come, knowing that the next few days would determine the course of the rest of her life. Robert emerged, disheveled and gray-faced, his eyes bloodshot and wary. At 32, he still possessed the handsome features that had charmed her in Ohio, but years of hard living and disappointment had etched lines around his mouth and eyes that aged him beyond his years. "Kate," he began, his voice hoarse. "Kate, I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't put a roof over our heads," she replied, her tone flat. "Sorry doesn't give back the 5 years I've spent building a home you could throw away in a single night." Robert sank into a chair across from her, burying his face in his hands. "I thought I could win it all back. My luck had turned, I was sure of it. Then Whitaker suggested one last hand, double or nothing. And you couldn't resist," Kate finished for him. "Just like you couldn't resist the time you lost our seed money for this year's planting, or the time you wagered the horse we needed to work the field." "I'll make it right," Robert insisted, a desperate edge to his voice. "I'll go to Carson City, find work in the mines. We can start over, Kate." Kate stood, gathering their cups with steady hands. "No, Robert, there will be no we this time. You've made your choice and now I must make mine." The pain that flashed across his face might have moved her once, but Kate had spent too many nights waiting, too many mornings covering the bruises from his drunken rages when the losses mounted. Too many promises broken. "Where will you go?" Robert asked, his voice small. "I don't know yet," Kate answered truthfully, "but I won't be here when Stanley Whitaker comes to claim his prize." The silence between them stretched, filled with 5 years of shared history and the wreckage of what might have been. Finally, Robert stood. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight," he said. "Give you some peace." Kate nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As the door closed behind him, she allowed herself one moment of weakness, one shuddering sob that carried the weight of her shattered dreams. Then, wiping her eyes, she began to plan. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a mockery of the darkness that had settled over Kate's life. She rose early, as was her habit, and set about her chores with mechanical precision. The chickens needed feeding, the cow milking, the garden tending. Life continued, even as her world crumbled. She was hanging laundry on the line when she spotted a figure approaching on horseback. Shielding her eyes against the morning sun, Kate watched as the rider drew closer. It wasn't Stanley Whitaker, whose portly frame she would have recognized instantly. This man sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders and straight back suggesting strength and confidence. As he neared the house, Kate could make out more details: a dark hat pulled low, a duster coat dusty from the trail, and beneath it, clothing that seemed a cut above what most cowboys wore. He reined his horse to a stop at the edge of her yard, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Mrs. Richardson?" he called, his voice deep and clear. "Yes," Kate answered, setting down her basket of wet linens and moving toward the fence. "I'm Katherine Richardson." Up close, she could see that Mrs. Foster's description had been accurate. The stranger's eyes were indeed the color of a storm cloud, set in a face that spoke of both hardship and determination. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 30, with a day's growth of beard shadowing his jaw. "Lucas Reeves, madam," he introduced himself, dismounting with fluid grace. "I was hoping I might have a word with you and your husband." "My husband is not here at present," Kate replied, a protective instinct making her wary despite the man's polite demeanor. "What business do you have with us, Mr. Reeves?" Lucas Reeves studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I understand your husband had some trouble at the Gilded Ace 2 nights ago, a game with Stanley Whitaker that ended, unfortunately." Kate lifted her chin, pride overcoming embarrassment. "If you've come to collect another debt, Mr. Reeves, I'm afraid you'll have to get in line. My husband has gambled away all we have." A hint of a smile touched the corner of Lucas's mouth. "I'm not here to collect, Mrs. Richardson." "Quite the opposite, in fact." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "I believe this belongs to you. With trembling fingers, Kate accepted the paper he offered. Unfolding it, she found herself staring at the deed to their home, the very deed she had last seen in Robert's desperate grasp. "I don't understand," she whispered, looking up at Lucas in confusion. "How did you— I had a game of my own with Mr. Whittaker last night," Lucas explained, his voice matter of fact. He was quite confident in his abilities, perhaps too confident. "You won our home in a card game?" Kate asked incredulously. "I did." Lucas nodded, then added with a slight smile, "I find that men like Whittaker often mistake arrogance for skill. It's a weakness easily exploited by someone with patience." Kate stared at the deed in her hands, emotions warring within her: relief, confusion, suspicion. "Why would you do this?" "You don't know us." Lucas shifted, seeming almost uncomfortable with the question. "Let's just say I have a particular distaste for men who prey on the weaknesses of others. Whittaker didn't win your home fairly, Mrs. Richardson. He cheated your husband." "That doesn't surprise me," Kate replied bitterly, "but it doesn't explain why you would involve yourself in our affairs." "Perhaps I believe in setting things right when I can," Lucas said simply. He gestured to the deed. "That's yours now, free and clear. I've had the transfer properly notarized by Judge Wilson this morning." Kate clutched the document to her chest, overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Reeves." "No thanks necessary, madam." Lucas replaced his hat, preparing to mount his horse. "I'll be in town for a few more days if you have any questions." "Wait," Kate called as he swung into the saddle. "At least let me offer you a meal. It's the least I can do." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "That's kind of you. Perhaps tomorrow. I have some business to attend to in town today." "Tomorrow then," Kate agreed. "Noon. I'll be here." With a tip of his hat, Lucas turned his horse and rode back toward town, leaving Kate standing by the fence, the deed clutched in her hand like a talisman against the chaos of the past days. Robert returned shortly before sunset, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He froze when he saw Kate sitting calmly at the table, the deed spread before her. "How did you get that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It seems you have a guardian angel, Robert," Kate replied, studying her husband's face. "A man named Lucas Reeves won it back from Stanley Whittaker and returned it to me this morning." Robert's face drained of color. "Lucas Reeves," he repeated, "tall fellow with gray eyes. You know him?" Kate asked sharply. Robert sank into a chair, his expression haunted. "I know of him. He's got a reputation from Texas to Montana. They call him Lucky Luke in some circles. He's not just any gambler, Kate. He's the kind of man other gamblers fear." A chill ran down Kate's spine despite the warmth of the evening. "What kind of man is that?" "The kind who never loses," Robert said simply. "The kind who can read a man's tells like they're written on his forehead. The kind who—" He trailed off, swallowing hard. "The kind who what, Robert?" "The kind who's rumored to have killed men who have crossed him," Robert finished, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Though they say it's always fair, always self-defense." Kate thought back to the man she had met that morning, his calm demeanor, his direct gaze, the way he had handed her back her future without asking for anything in return. Could such a man be dangerous? Certainly. The West was full of dangerous men. But something about Lucas Reeves had struck her as different, principled, even. "He's coming for dinner tomorrow," she informed Robert, watching his reaction carefully. "I invited him to thank him properly." "Kate, I don't think—" "You don't get to think anymore, Robert," Kate cut him off, her voice firm. "Your thinking is what got us into this mess. Mr. Reeves has given us back our home, and I will show him the hospitality he deserves." Robert looked as if he wanted to argue, but instead he nodded, a defeated man accepting one more blow. "What will you tell him about me?" "The truth," Kate replied simply. "That you're a man who can't resist the turn of a card even when it costs you everything that matters." The hurt in Robert's eyes might have moved her once, but Kate had built a wall around her heart in the past days, a necessary fortification against the pain of his betrayal. "I'll be gone before he arrives," Robert said quietly. "There's a cattle drive heading north from Carson City." They're looking for hands. Kate nodded, relief and sorrow mingling in her chest. This was the end, then the final chapter of their life together. That's probably for the best. That night, as she lay in bed listening to Robert moving about in the barn, Kate found herself thinking of Lucas Reeves. What kind of man went out of his way to right a wrong that had nothing to do with him? And what had brought him to Verdi in the first place? Questions swirled in her mind, keeping sleep at bay until the first light of dawn crept through her window. Robert was gone before she rose, leaving behind a note that contained the words, "I'm sorry," and little else. Kate folded the paper carefully and placed it in her keepsake box, a symbolic burial of the marriage that had once filled her with such hope. As noon approached, Kate found herself taking unusual care with her appearance. She chose her best dress, a cornflower blue that matched her eyes, and pinned up her chestnut hair in a style that was neat but not severe. She told herself it was simply a matter of showing proper respect to the man who had saved her home, but a small voice inside whispered that there was more to it than that. The aroma of fresh bread and roasting chicken filled the house as she prepared the finest meal she could manage on short notice. She had even picked flowers from her garden to brighten the table, columbines and wild daisies arranged in her mother's crystal vase, one of the few treasures she had brought from Ohio. Lucas arrived precisely at noon, his appearance transformed from the dusty traveler of the day before. He had shaved, and his clothing, a clean shirt, vest, and dark trousers, spoke of a man who valued presentation without ostentation. He had brought a bottle of wine, a luxury in Verdi. "Mrs. Richardson," he greeted her, removing his hat as she opened the door. "Thank you for your invitation." "Please call me Kate," she replied, gesturing for him to enter. "And thank you for the wine, that's most generous." Lucas stepped inside, his tall frame making the modest home seem smaller somehow. He glanced around, taking in the simple but tasteful furnishings, the gleaming surfaces that spoke of Kate's careful attention. "You have a lovely home," he observed, handing her the wine. "Thanks to you, I still do," Kate responded, leading him to the table. "Please sit, I hope you're hungry." As they settled into the meal, Kate found herself studying her guest with increasing curiosity. Lucas Reeves was not what she had expected based on Robert's fearful description. He ate with the manners of a gentleman, spoke articulately about a range of subjects, and listened to her with genuine interest, a rarity among the men she had encountered in the West. "Your husband isn't joining us?" Lucas asked eventually, the question casual but his eyes watchful. Kate set down her fork, deciding on honesty. "Robert left this morning. He's taken work with a cattle drive heading north." Lucas nodded, unsurprised. "I suspected he might." "You did?" Kate asked, puzzled. "Men like your husband, men who can't resist the lure of gambling, they tend to run when confronted with the consequences of their actions," Lucas explained, his tone matter of fact rather than judgmental. "It's a pattern I've seen many times." "You seem to know a lot about gamblers, Mr. Reeves," Kate observed. "Lucas, please," he corrected gently. "And yes, I do. I've spent most of my adult life studying them, their habits, their tells, their weaknesses." "Is that how you make your living, gambling?" Kate asked, then immediately regretted the directness of her question. "I'm sorry, that was impertinent." Lucas smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "Not at all, it's a fair question, and the answer is yes, partly. I've made a good living at the card table. But these days, I'm more selective about the games I play and the opponents I choose." "What brought you to Verdi?" Kate asked, pouring more wine into his glass. "It's hardly a destination for someone of your talents." Lucas considered her for a moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "I was following a man named James Blackwell. He's wanted in Arizona territory for murder, shot a young father in the back over a disputed hand of poker." His expression darkened. "I tracked him as far as Carson City before losing his trail. When I heard about a high-stakes game in Verdi, I thought I'd investigate." "You're a lawman?" Kate asked, surprised. "Not officially," Lucas admitted. "Let's say I have an arrangement with certain territorial marshals." I find men they're looking for, men who hide in the gambling world where I have connections they don't. A bounty hunter, then, Kate said softly. I prefer to think of myself as someone who ensures justice finds those who deserve it, Lucas replied, his voice steady. The bounties are secondary. Kate absorbed this information, reconciling it with the man sitting across from her. It explained much his skill at cards, his presence in their small town, the air of quiet confidence that surrounded him. And Stanley Whitaker, she asked. Is he wanted somewhere? Lucas's mouth quirked into a half-smile. No, but he should be. He's a cheat and a swindler, but he's careful never quite crosses the line that would bring the law down on him. Yet you chose to intervene when he took our home, Kate pressed, needing to understand. Lucas met her gaze directly, his gray eyes intense. I don't like seeing innocent people suffer because of men like Whitaker. Your husband made his choice when he sat down at that table, but you... He paused. You didn't deserve to lose your home because of another man's weakness. The honesty in his voice touched something in Kate, a place that had grown hard and defensive in the years of Robert's gambling. Lucas Reeves might be a dangerous man in some ways, but there was an integrity about him that she couldn't deny. How long will you stay in Verde? She asked, changing the subject. I'm not sure, Lucas replied. A few more days, perhaps. I'm still hoping to pick up Blackwell's trail. And then I'll follow where it leads, he said simply. It's what I do. As the afternoon light began to fade, Lucas helped Kate clear the table, their conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. She learned that he had grown up in Missouri, the son of a riverboat captain who had lost everything to gamblers. He had taught himself the intricacies of cards, not to follow in those gamblers' footsteps, but to understand how they operated, how they cheated ordinary men out of their livelihoods. I should go, Lucas said finally, retrieving his hat from the hook by the door. Thank you for the meal, Kate. It's been a long time since I enjoyed such pleasant company. Thank you for coming, Kate replied, suddenly reluctant to see him leave, and for everything else. At the door, Lucas paused, turning back to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Would it be presumptuous of me to call on you again before I leave town? Kate felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the wine they had shared. Not presumptuous at all. I'd like that very much. With a tip of his hat and a smile that lingered in her mind long after he had gone, Lucas Reeves rode back to town, leaving Kate to ponder the strange turn her life had taken in just a few short days. The next morning, Kate woke to the sound of a wagon approaching her house. Peering through the window, she was startled to see Stanley Whitaker himself, accompanied by two men she recognized as regular patrons of the Gilded Ace. Cold dread settled in her stomach as she quickly dressed and went to meet them. Whitaker did not bother to dismount, his round face flushed with anger as he addressed her from the wagon seat. Mrs. Richardson, he said, his voice dripping with false politeness. I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the ownership of this property. Kate stood tall on her porch, the deed safely tucked in her apron pocket. There's no misunderstanding, Mr. Whitaker. This house is mine legally and properly. That remains to be seen, Whitaker sneered. Your husband lost it fair and square in this. Intervention by Reeves was most irregular. Judge Wilson may have been fooled by his smooth talk, but I assure you I will not rest until justice is served. Justice? Kate couldn't help but laugh. You speak of justice, Mr. Whitaker, when everyone in town knows you've been fleecing honest men for years. Whitaker's face darkened. Watch yourself, Mrs. Richardson. Women in your position abandoned, alone would do well to mind their manners. One of Whitaker's companions shifted uncomfortably, but the other, a lean, hard-faced man with a scar across his cheek, smirked at the implied threat. Is that why you're here, Mr. Whitaker? Kate asked, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her chest. To threaten a woman alone. I'm here to give you notice, Whitaker replied. I'm contesting the transfer of deed. Until the matter is resolved, I suggest you consider your position here temporary. With that, he signaled to his men and the wagon rolled away, leaving a cloud of dust and menace in its wake. Kate remained on the porch until they were out of sight, then sank onto the bench, her legs suddenly weak. Whitaker's visit had been a clear warning he wasn't done with her, or with the house. And with Robert gone and Lucas Reeves soon to follow, she would be left to face whatever came next alone. The thought of Lucas brought a different kind of flutter to her chest. In just 2 brief encounters, he had made a deeper impression on her than most men she had known for years. There was something about his quiet strength, his principled actions, that spoke to a part of her that had been dormant during the years of her marriage, a part that recognized something kindred in him. But Lucas was passing through, following his own path. And Kate had learned the hard way not to build hopes on shifting foundations. With resolve, she stood and went about her daily chores, determined to face whatever challenges Whitaker might bring. She had survived Robert's betrayal. She would survive this too. By mid-afternoon, Kate had almost managed to put Whitaker's visit out of her mind when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Looking up from her garden, she was relieved to see Lucas riding toward the house, his expression serious. "Kate," he called, dismounting quickly. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she assured him, brushing dirt from her hands. "What brings you out here, Whitaker?" Lucas replied grimly. "I heard he paid you a visit this morning. Word travels fast in a town this size." "He's contesting the deed," Kate confirmed, leading Lucas to the shade of the porch. He seemed quite confident. Lucas's face hardened. "He's bluffing. The deed transfer was legal and proper. Judge Wilson witnessed it himself." He studied her face carefully. "Did Whitaker threaten you?" Kate hesitated, then nodded. Not directly, but the implication was clear enough. A muscle twitched in Lucas's jaw. "I shouldn't have let him walk away from that table," he muttered, almost to himself. "I knew what kind of man he was." "You couldn't have known he'd come after me," Kate said reasonably. "And besides, you've already done more than enough." Lucas paced the length of the porch, his movements controlled but tense. "Whitaker won't stop," he said finally, turning to face her. "Men like him can't accept defeat, especially not at the hands of a woman who refuses to be intimidated. What would you suggest?" Kate asked, a weariness creeping into her voice. "I can't exactly challenge him to a duel." Despite the gravity of the situation, Lucas smiled. "No, but I can make sure he understands the consequences of pursuing this further." He hesitated, then added, "I've decided to extend my stay in Verdi for a while, at least until this situation with Whitaker is resolved." Relief and something warmer flooded through Kate. "You don't have to do that. Your man Blackwell could be getting further away even as we speak." "Blackwell can wait," Lucas said firmly. "I won't leave you to face Whitaker alone." The intensity in his gray eyes made Kate's breath catch. "Thank you," she said softly, "but I don't want to be another obligation for you, another wrong to right." Lucas stepped closer, his expression softening. "Is that what you think? That I see you as an obligation?" Kate met his gaze steadily. "Why else would a man like you concern yourself with the troubles of a woman you barely know?" For a moment, Lucas was silent, considering his words carefully. "Because from the moment I saw you standing in your yard, dignity intact despite what your husband had done, I knew you were a woman worth knowing better." He smiled slightly. "Call it instinct. I've learned to trust mine over the years." The honesty in his voice was unmistakable, and Kate felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Before she could respond, however, a distant shout caught their attention. Looking toward the road, they saw a rider approaching at a gallop, dust billowing behind him. As he drew closer, Kate recognized young Billy Foster, Dr. Foster's son, his face flushed with exertion. "Mrs. Richardson," he called, reining his horse to a stop. "Pa sent me to fetch you quick." "It's your husband, he's been hurt bad." Kate froze, her mind struggling to process the boy's words. "Robert, but he left for the cattle drive." "Never made it that far, madam," Billy explained breathlessly. "They found him beaten half to death on the road to Carson City. Pa says it's touch and go." Lucas's hand was on her arm, steady and reassuring. "I'll take you," he said simply, then turned to Billy. "Ride back and tell your father we're coming." As Billy galloped away, Lucas helped Kate into the saddle of his horse, then mounted behind her, his arms strong around her as they rode toward town. Kate's mind was a whirl of confusion and dread. Robert had left her, had destroyed their life together with his weakness, and yet the thought of him dying alone filled her with a grief she hadn't expected to feel. Dr. Foster's house sat on the edge of town, a white clapboard structure with a separate office attached. As Lucas helped Kate dismount, the door opened and Mrs. Foster hurried out, her kind face drawn with concern. "Oh, Kate," she said, embracing her briefly. "Come quickly. He's been asking for you." Kate followed Mrs. Foster inside, conscious of Lucas close behind her. The doctor's office smelled of antiseptic and herbs, a clean, medicinal scent that did little to mask the underlying odor of blood and pain. Dr. Foster looked up from his patient, his expression grave. "He's conscious," he said quietly to Kate, "but I won't lie to you, his injuries are severe. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a fractured skull. Whoever did this meant business." Kate approached the examination table where Robert lay, his face almost unrecognizable beneath the bruising and swelling. One eye was completely closed, the other barely open, but it found her as she came to stand beside him. "Kate," he whispered, his voice a rasp of pain. "You came." "Of course I came," she replied, taking his battered hand gently in hers. Whatever anger she had harbored seemed insignificant in the face of his suffering. "I'm sorry," Robert managed, each word clearly costing him. "Not just for the gambling, for everything, for not being the man you deserved." Kate felt tears threaten, but she held them back, knowing Robert needed her strength now. "Save your energy," she told him. "You need to rest to heal." Robert's eye flicked past her, widening slightly as it registered Lucas standing in the doorway. "Reeves," he breathed, "you're still here." Lucas stepped forward, his face solemn. "I am. Who did this to you, Richardson?" Robert's breathing was labored, each intake of breath clearly agonizing. "Whitaker's men," he gasped. "Caught me on the road, said it was a message." "For who?" Lucas pressed, his voice gentle but insistent. "For both of you," Robert replied, his grip on Kate's hand tightening. "Said to tell you, the house is still his, and that lucky Luke should mind his own business if he knows what's good for him." Kate looked up at Lucas, horror dawning as she understood. "This is because of the deed. Because you won back our home." Lucas's expression was grim, a cold anger in his eyes that sent a shiver down Kate's spine. "It's because Whitaker is a coward who strikes at the vulnerable when he can't face his real opponent." He turned to Dr. Foster. "Will he survive?" The doctor hesitated. "If he makes it through the night, his chances improve, but I won't pretend the outlook is good." Robert's grip on Kate's hand weakened. "Kate," he whispered, "the saddlebag under the bed at home. Important?" "What saddlebag, Robert?" Kate asked, leaning closer. But Robert's eye had closed, his breathing becoming more shallow as he slipped into unconsciousness. Dr. Foster moved quickly to check his pulse. "He's still with us," he assured Kate, "but he needs quiet now. Rest is his best chance." Kate stood, her legs unsteady. "I should stay with him." "No," Lucas said firmly. "If Whitaker's men did this, they could come looking for you next. We need to get you somewhere safe." "He's right, Kate," Mrs. Foster added. "I'll sit with Robert. You go with Mr. Reeves. We'll send word if there's any change." Kate looked at her husband's broken form, torn between her sense of duty and the very real danger Lucas had identified. Finally, she nodded. "I need to go to the house first," she said. "Robert mentioned a saddlebag. It might be important." "I'll take you," Lucas agreed, "but we make it quick." If Whitaker's escalating to this level of violence, neither of us is safe out in the open. The ride back to Kate's house was tense, both of them scanning the surroundings for any sign of threat. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the landscape that seemed to harbor hidden dangers at every turn. When they reached the house, Lucas insisted on going in first, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip as he checked each room methodically. "All clear," he called finally, allowing Kate to enter. She went straight to the bedroom she had shared with Robert, kneeling to look beneath the bed. Sure enough, a worn leather saddlebag lay pushed against the wall, partially hidden by the bedskirt. Kate pulled it out, surprised by its weight. "What's in it?" Lucas asked, standing in the doorway. Kate opened the bag, her breath catching as she saw the contents. Stacks of money, more money than she had ever seen in one place, filled the saddlebag to the brim. "My God," she whispered, looking up at Lucas in shock. "Where did Robert get this much money?" Lucas knelt beside her, examining the currency carefully. "These are marked bills," he said after a moment, his expression darkening. "Bank money." "Are you saying this is stolen?" Kate asked, horror creeping into her voice. "It looks that way," Lucas confirmed grimly. "The question is, did Robert steal it, or is he holding it for someone else?" The implications crashed over Kate like a wave. Had her husband been involved in a bank robbery? Was that why Whitaker's men had beaten him so severely, not just because of the house, but because of this money? "We need to get this somewhere secure," Lucas decided, repacking the saddlebag. "And you too. Do you have family or friends in town you could stay with?" Kate shook her head. "No one who could stand against Whitaker if he came looking." She hesitated, then added, "What about the sheriff, Sheriff Thompson?" Lucas's expression was skeptical. "Word is he and Whitaker are thick as thieves. We can't risk it." "Then where?" Kate asked, fear beginning to take hold as the full danger of their situation became clear. Lucas thought for a moment, then nodded decisively. "There's a place outside of town, an old line shack on the Carson Road. It belongs to a friend of mine, a rancher named Miller. He lets me use it when I'm passing through. It's isolated, defensible." "You want me to hide in a line shack?" Kate asked, incredulous despite the circumstances. "Just until we figure out what's going on with this money and with Whitaker," Lucas assured her. "Pack whatever you need for a few days." "We should leave before full dark." Kate hesitated only briefly before nodding. Whatever Robert had gotten himself into, it had become her problem now. And with Lucas Reeves as her only ally, she had little choice but to trust his judgment. Quickly, she gathered essentials, clothing, a few personal items, the photograph of her parents that sat on her bedside table. As she moved through the house that had been her home for 5 years, a sense of unreality washed over her. How had her life unraveled so completely in the space of a few days? "Ready," Lucas called softly from the doorway. Kate took one last look around, then nodded. "Ready." The line shack was indeed isolated, nestled in a small grove of pine trees about 5 miles outside of Verde. It was a simple one-room structure with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed, a rough-hewn table, and little else. Lucas lit the oil lamp hanging from a ceiling beam, illuminating the sparse but clean interior. "It's not much," he acknowledged, setting down Kate's bag and the saddlebag of money. "But it's secure." Kate moved to the single window, looking out at the darkness that had fallen during their ride. "How long do you think we'll need to stay here?" "That depends on what we learn about this money," Lucas replied, busying himself with starting a fire in the fireplace. "And on Robert's condition. If he regains consciousness, he might be able to explain where it came from." Kate turned to watch him, the flickering firelight casting his profile in sharp relief. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "You could have left town days ago, continued tracking your bounty. Instead, you're caught up in my troubles, putting yourself at risk." Lucas looked up from the fire, his gray eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I told you before I don't like seeing innocent people suffer because of men like Whitaker." "Is that the only reason?" Kate pressed, surprising herself with her boldness. Lucas stood, crossing the small room until he stood before her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "No," he admitted quietly, "that's not the only reason." The air between them seemed charged with something Kate hadn't felt in years, perhaps had never truly felt before. It was Lucas who broke the moment, stepping back with a small smile. "You should get some rest," he said, gesturing to the bed. "I'll keep watch. There's room for both of us," Kate offered, then blushed at the implication. "I mean, we could take turns sleeping. You need rest too." Lucas's smile widened slightly. "I've gone days without sleep when necessary, but thank you for the consideration." As Kate settled on the narrow bed, pulling a rough woolen blanket around her shoulders, she watched Lucas take a position by the window, his profile alert and watchful in the dim light. Despite the danger that had driven them to this isolated cabin, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, she felt a strange sense of peace in his presence, a feeling that, whatever came, she was no longer facing it alone. Dawn broke clear and cool, sunlight filtering through the pine boughs outside the lined shack window. Kate awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of quiet movement. Opening her eyes, she found Lucas by the small stove, his back to her as he tended to a pan of what looked like bacon. "You cook too," she observed, sitting up and smoothing her rumpled dress. Lucas glanced over his shoulder, a half-smile playing on his lips. One of many skills acquired on the trail, not particularly well but enough to keep body and soul together. He nodded toward a basin of water on the table. "I brought water from the creek if you'd like to freshen up." Kate thanked him, appreciating his thoughtfulness as she quickly washed her face and hands and tidied her hair as best she could without a mirror. The domestic simplicity of the scene, breakfast cooking, morning light, the comfortable silence between them struck her as both strange and oddly right, given their circumstances. "I need to ride into town," Lucas said as they shared the simple meal of bacon, hardtack, and coffee. "Check on your husband's condition and see what I can learn about Whitaker's movements." "I'm coming with you," Kate said immediately. Lucas shook his head. "It's not safe. If Whitaker's men are looking for you, they're looking for you too," Kate pointed out. "And I won't sit here hiding while my husband may be dying and you put yourself at risk on my behalf." She met his gaze steadily. "Besides, 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. For a moment, Lucas looked as if he might argue further, but then he nodded, a grudging respect in his expression. "All right, but we go carefully and you stay close to me at all times." They rode double on Lucas's horse, approaching Verdi from the east to avoid the main road where they might be more easily spotted. The town was just coming to life, shopkeepers opening their doors, a few early patrons entering the bakery for fresh bread. "We'll stop at Dr. Foster's first," Lucas decided, guiding the horse down a side street. "Then I want to check something at the telegraph office, Doctor." Foster met them at the door, his face grave but not despairing. "He made it through the night," he reported. "Still unconscious, but his breathing is stronger." Relief washed over Kate. "Can I see him?" The doctor nodded, leading her into the examination room where Robert lay. He looked marginally better than the day before, some of the swelling in his face reduced, but he was still a shocking sight. Kate approached quietly, noting the steady rise and fall of his chest. "Has he said anything more?" Lucas asked Dr. Foster in a low voice. "Nothing coherent," the doctor replied. "He's delirious when he does speak something about a bank in Carson City and a man named Dawson." Lucas's expression sharpened. "Dawson, are you sure?" Dr. Foster nodded. "That name came up several times. Mean anything to you?" "Perhaps," Lucas said thoughtfully. "There was a bank robbery in Carson City 2 weeks ago. A teller was killed. The descriptions of the robbers were vague, but one name that came up in the investigation was Ethan Dawson, a known associate of Stanley Whitaker." Kate looked up from Robert's bedside, connecting the dots. "The money in the saddlebag, you think it's from that robbery, that Robert was involved somehow?" "It's possible," Lucas acknowledged. "But something doesn't add up. If Robert was part of the robbery, why would Whitaker's men beat him? And why would Robert keep the money hidden in your house instead of using it to pay his gambling debts?" Dr. Foster looked between them, confusion evident on his face. "What money are you talking about?" Lucas hesitated, then decided on trust. "We found a saddlebag full of cash hidden in the Richardsons' home, marked bills that look like they could be from a bank." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "That sounds like trouble you don't need, Kate. Too late for that," Kate replied grimly. "We're already in it up to our necks." Lucas squeezed her shoulder gently, then turned back to Dr. Foster. We need to keep this between us for now. If Whitaker is involved in the robbery and if he thinks Robert has the money, he'll stop at nothing to get it back," Dr. Foster finished, nodding in understanding. "Your secret is safe with me, but what will you do?" "First, I need to confirm my suspicions," Lucas said. "I'm going to check at the telegraph office, see if there are any messages about the Carson City robbery. Then we'll decide our next move." Kate reluctantly left Robert's side after extracting a promise from Dr. Foster to send word immediately if his condition changed. Outside, the streets were busier now, the morning well underway. Lucas led Kate toward the telegraph office, both of them alert for any sign of Whitaker or his men. The telegraph operator, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, recognized Lucas with a nod. "Mr. Reeves, got that information you asked about yesterday." Lucas accepted a folded piece of paper, scanning its contents quickly. "Just as I thought," he murmured, then addressed the operator. "Any messages come through about a bank robbery in Carson City? Suspects, descriptions, that sort of thing?" The operator nodded eagerly, clearly enjoying being part of something exciting. "Matter of fact, yes. Sheriff got a wire 2 days ago asking to keep an eye out for 3 men. One of them matches your husband's description, Mrs. Richardson," he added, glancing at Kate with barely concealed curiosity. Lucas folded the paper and tucked it into his coat. "Thank you. If anything else comes through on this matter, I'd appreciate knowing about it." Outside, Kate pulled him into the shadow of an alleyway. "What did that paper say? And do they really think Robert was part of the robbery?" Lucas showed her the telegram he'd received. It was from a Marshall Daniels in Carson City, confirming that $5,000 had been stolen from the First Bank of Carson City on May 12th. And that one of the suspected robbers was indeed Ethan Dawson, known associate of Stanley Whitaker. "As for Robert," Lucas said carefully, "it's possible he was involved, but it's also possible he came into possession of the money some other way. Either way, it puts him and you in a dangerous position." Kate leaned against the wall of the building, the weight of everything threatening to overwhelm her. "What do we do now?" Before Lucas could answer, a shout from down the street caught their attention. "There they are, get them." 2 men, one Kate recognized as the scarred man who had accompanied Whitaker to her house, were running toward them, hands reaching for weapons. Lucas reacted instantly, pushing Kate deeper into the alley. "Run," he commanded, drawing his pistol. "Back to the doctor's, I'll hold them off." For a moment, Kate hesitated, unwilling to leave him. But the determined set of his jaw and the skill with which he positioned himself told her this was a situation he had faced before. With a nod, she gathered her skirts and ran, the sound of gunfire erupting behind her. She reached Dr. Foster's house breathless, bursting through the door without knocking. "Whitaker's men," she gasped to the startled doctor. "They found us." Lucas is holding them off, but a shot rang out, closer than the others, and Kate whirled to see Lucas backing into the doctor's yard, firing methodically at his pursuers. He was moving well, showing no signs of injury, but the grim set of his face told her the situation was dire. "Get inside," he called to her. "Barricade the door." Dr. Foster was already moving, grabbing his shotgun from above the fireplace. "This has gone far enough," he declared. "I won't have gunplay in my yard with patients inside." He strode out, shotgun raised, as Lucas ducked behind the water trough at the edge of the property. "That's enough," Dr. Foster bellowed, his usually gentle voice carrying surprising authority. "The next man who fires a shot gets both barrels." The brief pause in gunfire that followed gave Lucas the opening he needed. With precise aim, he fired twice more. One of Whitaker's men cried out, dropping his pistol as he clutched his arm. The other dove for cover behind a wagon. "It's over, Parker," Lucas called to the injured man. "Tell Whitaker if he wants the money, he can face me himself instead of sending his dogs to do his dirty work." The injured man, Parker, glared at Lucas with hatred. "This ain't over, Reeves, not by a long shot." Supporting his wounded arm, he backed away. his companion covering their retreat with sporadic fire that seemed designed more to keep Lucas pinned down than to hit him. When they had disappeared around the corner, Lucas approached Dr. Foster, nodding his thanks. "I apologize for bringing this to your door, Doctor." "No need for apologies," Dr. Foster replied grimly. "But this situation is escalating beyond what our little town can handle. Sheriff Thompson may be in Whitaker's pocket, but there's a U.S. Marshal office in Carson City that would be mighty interested in bank robbery money and the men who took it." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. This has gone beyond a simple dispute over a deed." He turned to Kate, who had come out onto the porch. "We need to get that money to Carson City, and we need to do it now, before Whitaker realizes what we're planning." "But Robert," Kate began. "Is safer here than anywhere else," Dr. Foster assured her. "Whitaker won't risk coming after him in my house, not with half the town watching. And his condition is stable for now." Kate knew they were right. The situation had grown too dangerous, the stakes too high for half measures. "All right," she agreed. "When do we leave?" "As soon as possible," Lucas decided. "We'll need fresh horses. We can't risk going back to your house or the livery stable where Whitaker might have men watching." "My son has 2 horses at our place," Dr. Foster offered. "Good animals, fast and steady. You're welcome to them." Plans were quickly made. They would leave within the hour, riding north to avoid the main road to Carson City, where Whitaker's men might be watching. The journey would be longer but safer, taking them through less traveled country where they could more easily spot anyone following. As Kate helped Dr. Foster's wife prepare food for their journey, she found herself wondering at the strange path her life had taken. A week ago, she had been a farmer's wife, secure in her home if not entirely happy in her marriage. Now she was preparing to flee town with a virtual stranger, carrying stolen money, her husband lying near death and armed men hunting her. Yet despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, she felt more alive than she had in years. And when she looked at Lucas, checking the horses and securing the saddlebag of money, she felt a certainty that had nothing to do with their precarious circumstances and everything to do with the man himself. "You care for him, don't you?" Mrs. Foster observed quietly, catching Kate's gaze. Kate started, embarrassed at being so transparent. "I hardly know him," she protested. Mrs. Foster smiled knowingly. "Sometimes that doesn't matter, sometimes you just know." She handed Kate a small bundle of food. "Be careful, dear. Men like Lucas Reeves live complicated lives." Before Kate could respond, Lucas appeared in the doorway. "We're ready," he said. "We should go now while the street is busy with the lunch crowd. Easier to slip away unnoticed." They said their goodbyes quickly, Kate embracing Mrs. Foster with genuine affection and extracting one final promise from Dr. Foster to watch over Robert. Then they were mounting up, the saddlebag of money securely tied to Lucas's saddle, and riding out the back way, staying to side streets until they reached the northern edge of town. As they left Verdi behind, pushing the horses to a steady canter once they were clear of buildings, Kate felt a curious mixture of fear and exhilaration. She glanced at Lucas, riding tall and alert beside her, and found him watching her with a similar expression. "Having second thoughts?" he asked. Kate shook her head, the wind of their passage tugging at her hair. "No, strange as it sounds, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Lucas smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I know exactly what you mean." They rode north through the afternoon, the landscape changing from the settled farmland around Verdi to wilder country pine forests giving way to open meadows, then back to forest again as they climbed into higher elevation. Lucas set a pace that was brisk but not punishing, aware that they needed to preserve the horses' strength for a long journey. As the sun began to lower toward the western mountains, Lucas led them off the trail to a small clearing beside a creek. "We'll camp here for the night," he decided. "Push on at first light." While Lucas tended to the horses, Kate gathered wood for a small fire. The evening was mild, but the mountain nights could turn cool quickly, and the fire would provide both warmth and a means to heat their simple meal of jerky and beans from Dr. Foster's provisions. As darkness settled around them, they sat close to the fire, the crackling flames the only sound besides the gentle gurgle of the creek. Lucas had been quiet for the last hour, his expression thoughtful as he stared into the fire. "What are you thinking?" Kate asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Lucas looked up, his gray eyes reflecting the firelight. "I'm thinking about what happens after we reach Carson City," he admitted. "After we turn in the money and give our statements about Whitaker and the robbery." "You'll go back to tracking your bounty," Kate supplied. "James Blackwell." Lucas nodded slowly. "That was the plan." He hesitated, then asked, "And what about you? Will you return to Verdi, to Robert?" It was the question Kate had been avoiding since they left town, the question that had hovered at the edges of her consciousness as she rode beside Lucas, as she caught him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "My marriage was over even before Robert gambled away our home. I stayed out of duty, out of habit, but not out of love, not for a long time." The admission hung between them, weighted with implications neither had yet dared to voice. "And now?" Lucas asked softly. Kate met his gaze directly. "Now I find myself thinking about possibilities I never expected, about a future that looks very different from the one I had resigned myself to." Lucas set aside his coffee cup, moving to sit beside her on the log they had dragged near the fire. "Kate," he began, his voice low and serious, "I'm not the kind of man who makes promises lightly. My life, what I do, it's not conducive to settling down, to building something permanent." "I'm not asking for promises," Kate replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm not even sure what I'm asking for. I just know that when I'm with you I feel alive, like myself again after years of being someone else." Lucas reached for her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I feel it too," he admitted. "From that first moment in Verdi, there was something about you, a strength, a dignity even in the face of betrayal. I admired it. I admired you." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken desires and the weight of decisions yet to be made. It was Kate who moved first, closing the distance between them to press her lips gently against his. The kiss was tentative at first, a question more than a demand. But when Lucas's hand came up to cup her face, when he responded with a hunger that matched her own, tentative gave way to certain, question to answer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "We should get some rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Kate nodded, though rest was the last thing on her mind. As they prepared their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, she found herself wondering if she was being foolish, allowing her heart to lead her into territory as unknown and potentially dangerous as the wilderness around them. But as she watched Lucas move about the camp, his movements efficient and purposeful, she knew that whatever came next, whether joy or heartbreak, she would not regret these moments with him. This unexpected detour in a life that had for too long followed a predictable and unhappy path. They were back on the trail at dawn, pushing the horses harder now that they were rested. Lucas estimated they would reach Carson City by nightfall if they maintained their pace and encountered no trouble. Trouble, however, seemed determined to find them. Midway through the morning, as they crested a ridge overlooking a vast meadow, Lucas reined in sharply, his hand going to his pistol. "Riders," he said tersely, pointing to a cloud of dust in the distance. "Coming fast from the west." Kate squinted against the sun, making out the forms of 3 horsemen moving at a gallop across the meadow, converging on their position. "Whitaker's men?" she asked, fear coiling in her stomach. "Probably," Lucas confirmed grimly. "They must have guessed our destination and circled around to cut us off." He scanned the terrain quickly, making calculations. "We can't outrun them, not across open ground. We need to find cover, make a stand." To their right, the ridge they were on continued upward, becoming more rugged and forested. Lucas pointed toward a cluster of boulders about half a mile ahead. There, we can defend that position. They urged their horses forward, racing against the approaching riders. As they reached the boulders, Lucas helped Kate dismount, then quickly secured the horses in a small copse of trees. "Stay low," he instructed, leading her to a position behind the largest boulder, "and take this." He handed her a small derringer from his boot, just in case. Kate accepted the weapon, its weight unfamiliar but reassuring in her hand. "I've never shot anyone," she confessed. "Let's hope you won't have to start today," Lucas replied, checking his pistol. "But if it comes to it, aim for the center of the body and squeeze the trigger, don't pull it." The approaching riders had spotted them and were now making directly for their position, spreading out as they came. Lucas recognized the strategy immediately. They were attempting to flank them, approach from multiple directions. "Whitaker must want that money badly," Kate observed, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's not just the money anymore," Lucas said grimly. "It's pride. I've bested him twice now, once at cards and again when his men tried to corner us in town. Men like Whitaker don't forgive such insults." The riders were close enough now that Kate could make out details: the scarred man from town, Parker with his arm in a makeshift sling, and a third man she hadn't seen before. All were armed, their intentions clear in the determined set of their bodies. "That's far enough." Lucas called out when they were within earshot. "We've got the high ground and plenty of ammunition. Turn back now and no one has to die today." The riders slowed but didn't stop, fanning out to position themselves on three sides of the boulder outcropping. "You know what we want, Reeves." The scarred man shouted back, "Give us the money and maybe we let the woman go." "And maybe I believe in fairy tales too, Harrison," Lucas retorted. "Tell Whitaker if he wants to negotiate, he can come himself instead of sending his lapdogs." Harrison, the scarred man, spat on the ground. "Have it your way." He raised his arm, signaling to the others, and all three opened fire simultaneously. Bullets whined off the rocks around them as Lucas returned fire with methodical precision, forcing Harrison to duck behind his horse for cover. Kate pressed herself against the boulder, the derringer clutched tightly in her hand, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure it must be audible over the gunfire. "They're trying to pin us down, wear us out," Lucas explained during a brief lull in the shooting. "They know we have limited ammunition and nowhere to go." "What do we do?" Kate asked, fear making her voice tight. Lucas's expression was grim but determined. "We change the equation." He pointed to a jumble of rocks about 50 yards to their right. "I'm going to work my way over there, try to flank them. When I start firing, they'll focus on me. That's when you make a run for the horses." "And leave you here," Kate protested. "No, we stay together." "Kate," Lucas said urgently, taking her face in his hands, "listen to me. If anything happens to me, you take that money to Carson City. You tell Marshal Daniels everything about the robbery, about Whitaker, about Robert. It's the only way to end this." Before she could argue further, he kissed her hard and desperate, a kiss that spoke of regret for time they might never have. Then he was moving, using the cover of the boulders to work his way toward the position he had indicated. Kate watched him go, her heart in her throat, the derringer a cold weight in her palm. This was madness: 3 armed men against 1, and her with a weapon she barely knew how to use. Yet what choice did they have? Lucas had almost reached his new position when Parker spotted him, shouting a warning to the others. Gunfire erupted again, more intense now, focused on Lucas's moving form. Kate saw him dive behind a rock just as a bullet kicked up dirt at his heels. From his new vantage point, Lucas had a clear shot at the third man, who had made the mistake of exposing himself while trying to get a better angle. Lucas's shot caught him in the shoulder, sending him tumbling from his horse with a cry of pain. Harrison cursed, redirecting his fire toward Lucas while shouting at Parker to circle around behind. Kate realized with growing horror that Parker was now moving toward the copse of trees where their horses were tied, where the money was secured to Lucas's saddle. Without conscious thought, Kate was moving, staying low as she darted from boulder to boulder, using the skills she had learned hunting with her father in Ohio woods. Parker had his back to her, his attention fixed on the horses he had just spotted through the trees. "Stop right there," Kate commanded, her voice steadier than she felt as she raised the derringer. Parker whirled, surprise written across his face at the sight of a woman holding him at gunpoint. The surprise quickly transformed to contempt. "You won't shoot me, lady," he sneered, taking a step toward her. "I wouldn't be so sure," Kate replied, cocking the derringer. "I've lost my home, my husband, and nearly my life because of you and your friends. I don't have much left to lose." Something in her voice, a steel born of desperation and resolve, gave Parker pause. His eyes flickered from her face to the derringer and back. "The money isn't worth dying for," Kate continued, holding his gaze. "Not yours, not mine, not anyone's." For a moment it seemed her words had reached him. Then Parker's hand twitched toward his holster. The derringer's report was surprisingly loud for such a small weapon. Parker staggered backward, clutching his thigh where Kate's bullet had found its mark. He collapsed against a tree, blood seeping through his fingers, his face contorted with pain and rage. Kate kept the derringer trained on him, fighting the shock of what she had just done. "Don't move," she ordered, her voice shaking now. From the direction of the boulders, the gunfire had intensified. Kate was torn, Parker was wounded but not incapacitated, and Lucas was still outnumbered. The decision was made for her when Harrison's voice rang out in a howl of pain, followed by a final shot and then silence. Moments later, Lucas appeared at the edge of the trees, his face grim but triumphant. He took in the scene before him, Kate standing with the derringer still aimed at Parker, her face pale but determined, and something like pride flickered in his eyes. "Harrison?" Kate asked. "Won't be troubling anyone again," Lucas replied simply. He approached Parker, kicking the man's dropped pistol well out of reach. "Seems like you've had a run of bad luck, Parker. First your arm, now your leg." Parker glared up at them, pain and hatred warring in his expression. "Whitaker will kill you both for this," he spat. "There's nowhere you can hide." "Maybe," Lucas acknowledged, "but he'll have to do it from a prison cell." He turned to Kate. "You all right?" Kate nodded, the derringer finally lowering as the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving her shaky and nauseated. "I shot him," she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it herself. "You did what you had to do," Lucas assured her, gently taking the derringer from her trembling hand. "And you probably saved both our lives by doing it." They bound Parker's wound as best they could, then secured him to a tree with his own belt. The third man, whose wound was painful but not life-threatening, was similarly restrained some distance away. "What about them?" Kate asked as they prepared to leave. "We can't just leave them here." "We'll send help from Carson City," Lucas decided. "They have water and shelter from the sun. They'll survive until the law gets here." He checked the saddlebag of money, ensuring it was still secure, then helped Kate mount. As they rode away, leaving the site of the gunfight behind, Kate found herself struggling to process everything that had happened. She had shot a man. People had died. And through it all, Lucas had remained steady, his presence a rock she could cling to in the churning waters of violence and fear. "Lucas," she said as they rode side by side across the meadow, "thank you for everything." He looked at her, his gray eyes serious in his sun-bronzed face. "You don't need to thank me, Kate. If anything, I should be thanking you. You showed more courage back there than most men I've known." "Not courage," Kate corrected him. "Desperation, and maybe—" She hesitated, then finished softly, "maybe something worth fighting for." The look Lucas gave her then was filled with a warmth that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun, a promise of possibilities that neither of them had dared to voice aloud. In that moment, despite the danger that still pursued them, despite the uncertain future that awaited in Carson City, Kate felt a certainty settle in her heart. Whatever came next, she would face it with this man beside her. They reached Carson City as dusk was falling, the town's lights a welcome sight after the tension of the day. The U.S. Marshal's office was still open, a lamp burning in the window as they tied their horses at the hitching rail outside. Marshall Daniels was a tall, spare man with a silver mustache and eyes that had seen too much to be easily surprised. He listened to their story without interruption, his expression growing grimmer as Lucas detailed the bank robbery, Whitaker's involvement, Robert's beating, and their flight from Verdi. "I've been after Whitaker for years," he said when they had finished, examining the money from the saddlebag spread across his desk. "But he's always been careful, never leaves evidence, always has an alibi. This is the first solid connection we've had between him and any serious crime." "Will it be enough?" Kate asked. The marshal nodded slowly. "With your testimony, the money, and if your husband confirms the story when he's able, yes, I think it will be. Whitaker's days of operating with impunity in Nevada territory are coming to an end." He dispatched deputies immediately, some to retrieve the wounded men Lucas and Kate had left in the mountains, others to ride to Verdi with warrants for Whitaker and any remaining members of his gang. "You've both had a long day," Marshal Daniels observed, noting their exhausted faces. "There's a decent hotel down the street. Get some rest. I'll need formal statements from you both in the morning." The hotel was indeed decent, clean, quiet, with real beds and hot water for bathing. Kate found herself almost overwhelmed by these simple luxuries after the tension and danger of the past days. She and Lucas took adjoining rooms, though neither spoke of the kiss they had shared by the campfire, or the unresolved feelings that hummed between them like a plucked guitar string. After bathing and changing into a clean dress provided by the hotel owner's wife, Kate found herself standing at the window of her room, watching the nightlife of Carson City. So much had changed in such a short time. She had left behind the ruins of her marriage, shot a man, helped bring a criminal to justice. And somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with Lucas Reeves, a man whose life had no place for roots or permanence. A gentle knock at the connecting door roused her from her thoughts. She opened it to find Lucas standing there, similarly refreshed, his hair still damp from bathing. "I wanted to check on you," he said simply. "It's been a day of considerable stress." Kate smiled at the understatement. "That's one way to put it." She stepped back, inviting him into her room. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened since you walked into my yard a few days ago. It feels like a lifetime." "Danger has a way of compressing time," Lucas agreed, moving to stand beside her at the window. "Makes you see things more clearly sometimes." "And what do you see, Lucas?" Kate asked softly, turning to face him. He studied her face in the lamplight, his gray eyes serious. "I see a woman of extraordinary courage and resilience, a woman who deserves far better than what life has handed her so far." He paused, then added more quietly, "A woman I've come to care for more than I thought possible in such a short time." Kate's heart quickened at his words, at the intensity in his gaze. "And I see a man who hides his goodness behind a reputation for danger," she replied. "A man who risks his life to right wrongs that aren't his responsibility. A man she hesitated, then continued with newfound boldness. "A man I've fallen in love with against all reason or sense." The admission hung between them, impossible to take back, frightening in its vulnerability. For a moment, Lucas was still, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the distance between them, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "There's precious little reason or sense in this world," he murmured, "especially in matters of the heart." Their lips met in a kiss that held none of the desperate urgency of their first by the campfire. This was slower, deeper, a thorough exploration rather than a snatched moment. Kate's arms wound around his neck, drawing him closer as the kiss intensified, months of loneliness and years of emptiness falling away in the warmth of his embrace. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Kate," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "I need you to understand something. My life, what I do, it's dangerous, unpredictable. I've never allowed myself to think of settling down, of building the kind of life most women dream of." "I'm not most women," Kate replied, her hands still linked behind his neck. "And I've already lived the settled life. It nearly broke me." She smiled up at him, newfound confidence in her expression. "I'm not asking for promises, Lucas. I'm not even asking for forever. I'm just asking for now, for whatever time we can have together." The conflict in Lucas's eyes was painful to see, the war between what he wanted and what he believed he could offer. "You deserve better than now," he said softly. "Better than a man who lives with one eye always on the horizon." "Perhaps," Kate acknowledged. "But I've learned that life rarely gives us what we deserve, good or bad. It gives us choices, moments. This is our moment, Lucas. Whatever comes after, we'll face that when it comes." Something in her words seemed to reach him, to break through the barriers he had built around his heart. With a sound that was half surrender, half joy, Lucas pulled her close again, his kiss a promise that required no words. Later, as they lay tangled in the hotel bed, the night sounds of Carson City drifting through the open window, Lucas traced idle patterns on Kate's bare shoulder. "What happens now?" she asked, her head pillowed on his chest, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear a comfort she had not known she needed. Lucas was quiet for a moment, his fingers continuing their gentle exploration of her skin. "Marshall Daniels will move against Whitaker," he said finally. "There will be a trial, probably in Virginia City. You'll need to testify, as will I, and after," Kate pressed, lifting her head to look at him. Lucas met her gaze, something new and vulnerable in his expression. "After, that depends on you, Kate, on what you want." "What I want?" Kate repeated, surprised. "I thought your path was set tracking down James Blackwell, continuing your work with the Marshalls." "It was," Lucas admitted, "but paths can change, directions can shift." He sat up slightly, gathering her closer. "These past days with you have made me question things I thought were certain, made me wonder if there might be room in my life for more." Hope bloomed in Kate's chest, fragile but insistent. "What kind of more are you thinking of?" Lucas smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his serious face. "I'm thinking that Nevada territory is a big place, that a man with my skills could settle in one spot, Carson City maybe, or even Verdi once Whitaker's gone, and still work with the Marshalls when needed. I'm thinking that a house needs a woman's touch to truly be a home." His smile deepened. "I'm thinking that I love you, Kate Richardson, and that I'm tired of living my life alone." Tears pricked at Kate's eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. "Are you proposing, Lucas Reeves?" "Inelegantly, perhaps," he acknowledged with a soft laugh. "But yes, I believe I am. Not for today or tomorrow, there's much to be settled first, but for a future I never thought I'd want until I met you." Kate kissed him, pouring all her answer into the press of her lips against his. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. "Yes," she said simply, "yes to all of it." The next morning brought a flurry of activity. They gave their formal statements to Marshall Daniels, describing in detail the events in Verdi, the discovery of the money, and the gunfight in the mountains. By noon, deputies had returned with the wounded men, who, facing serious charges and the prospect of hanging, proved eager to implicate Whitaker in exchange for leniency. A telegraph from Dr. Foster brought the welcome news that Robert was conscious and improving. He had already provided a statement to the deputies who had arrived in Verdi, confirming that he had discovered Whitaker's connection to the bank robbery and had taken the money as evidence, intending to bring it to the authorities before fear, and his gambling addiction had overwhelmed his better judgment. "It seems your husband may have been trying to do the right thing in his own flawed way," Marshall Daniels observed to Kate. "Robert always had good intentions," Kate replied, a sad smile touching her lips. "He just lacked the strength to follow through on them." By evening, word came that Whitaker had been arrested attempting to flee Verdi. The case against him was mounting by the hour as more of his associates, seeing which way the wind was blowing, came forward with information about his various criminal enterprises across Nevada territory. "You've done good work," Marshall Daniels told Lucas as they shared a celebratory drink in his office. "Whitaker's conviction will make this territory a safer place for honest folk." "It was Kate who made it possible," Lucas replied, his hand finding hers beneath the table. "Her courage, her determination." The marshal nodded, a knowing look in his eyes as he observed the way they leaned toward each other, the unspoken intimacy between them. "Well, whatever the future holds for you both, you'll always have friends in the marshal's service." 2 weeks later, Kate stood on the porch of her house in Verde, watching as Lucas secured the last of their belongings to the wagon. The town had changed in their absence. Whitaker's absence felt most keenly by those who had lived under his shadow. Sheriff Thompson had resigned in disgrace when his connections to Whitaker's operations came to light, and a town meeting had elected a new man to the position, one who had stood up to Whitaker more than once and paid the price for it. Robert was recovering slowly at Dr. Foster's house. His injuries had been severe, but his spirit seemed stronger somehow, as if his brush with death had awakened something long dormant within him. He and Kate had spoken at length about their marriage, about its end, and about forgiveness both for each other and for themselves. "I hope you find happiness with Reeves," Robert had said during their last meeting. "He's a good man, better than I was to you." "We were young," Kate had replied, finding that the bitterness she had carried for so long had mellowed into something like compassion. "We made the best choices we knew how to make at the time." Now, as Lucas approached the porch, his gray eyes warm with promise, Kate felt the rightness of her new choice settling deep in her bones. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand. Kate took it, descending the steps of the house that had been both prison and sanctuary. "Ready," she confirmed. They had decided to sell the house, using the money to start fresh in Carson City, where Lucas had accepted a position as a special deputy to Marshal Daniels, a role that would allow him to use his unique skills while maintaining a more settled life than his previous existence. As they climbed onto the wagon seat, the keys to the house safely delivered to the new owners, a young couple with dreams not unlike those Kate had harbored when she first arrived in Verde, Kate glanced back one last time. "Any regrets?" Lucas asked, noting her reflective expression. Kate turned to him, her blue eyes clear and certain. "Not one," she replied. "The past is the past. It's the future I'm interested in now." Lucas smiled, leaning over to kiss her gently before setting the horses in motion. "Then let's go make one Mrs. Reeves to be, together." As the wagon rolled out of Verde, carrying them toward Carson City and the life they would build there, Kate leaned against Lucas's shoulder, contentment settling over her like a familiar blanket. Her husband had gambled away their home, but a cowboy had won it back and returned the keys, and in doing so, had given her something far more precious. A second chance at love, at life, at happiness. The road ahead stretched long and promising, bathed in the golden light of a Nevada sunset. Whatever challenges awaited them, and there would surely be many, Kate knew they would face them together. Two souls who had found each other against all odds in the vast wilderness of the West. 5 years later, Kate stood on the porch of their Carson City home, watching as Lucas taught their 3-year-old son, James, to ride his first pony. The boy's delighted laughter floated across the yard, mingling with the sounds of their 1-year-old daughter, Elizabeth, babbling in her cradle beside Kate's rocking chair. The years had been good to them. Lucas's work with the marshal's office had earned him respect throughout the territory, and Kate's small lending library, opened with money from the sale of the Verde house, had become a center of community life. Together, they had built a home filled with love, laughter, and the kind of contentment neither had dared to dream of before they found each other. Robert had eventually recovered from his injuries, though he walked with a permanent limp. Last Kate had heard, he was working as a clerk in a mercantile in Oregon Territory, having finally conquered his gambling addiction. They exchanged occasional letters, friendly, if somewhat formal, both of them having found peace with the end of their marriage and the different paths their lives had taken. Stanley Whitaker had been convicted of multiple crimes, including bank robbery and attempted murder, and was serving 20 years in Nevada State Prison. His criminal empire had crumbled, allowing honest businesses to flourish in Verde and other small towns across the territory. "Mama, look." James called, sitting proudly atop his pony as Lucas led them around the yard. "I'm riding just like Papa. I see you, darling," Kate called back, her heart full to bursting with love for her family. "You're doing wonderfully." Lucas caught her eye across the yard, his smile as warm and genuine as it had been that day in the hotel in Carson City, when he had first suggested a future together. 5 years had added a few lines to his face, a touch of silver at his temples, but to Kate, he was more handsome than ever, the hard edges softened by fatherhood, the vigilant wariness replaced by a steady contentment. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, children asleep inside, Lucas took Kate's hand in his, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of years together. "Any regrets?" he asked, echoing the question he had posed as they left Verde behind all those years ago. Kate leaned her head against his shoulder, considering the journey that had brought them to this moment, the danger, the uncertainty, the leap of faith they had both taken. "Not one," she replied, just as she had then. "You." Lucas looked out over the home they had built, the life they had created together, and shook his head. "Only that I didn't find you sooner," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Only that." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, two souls who had found in each other not just love, but partnership, strength, and a shared vision of what life could be. The cowboy who had won back a house and returned the keys had given Kate far more than a roof over her head. He had given her a home in the truest sense of the word, a place where love dwelled and flourished, where dreams took root and grew. And that, Kate reflected as she tilted her face up for Lucas's kiss, was worth more than all the gold in Nevada territory.